Today, we're talking about a racist serial killer named Joseph Paul Franklin. Over the span of 4 years, he killed people that he considered ugly, and he thought black people were the ugliest of all. He even set his sights on hustler publisher Larry Flynt in 1978. Flynt is obviously white, but his magazine published an interracial photo shoot. Flynt survived, but he was paralyzed and wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life. Franklin went on to kill more than 20 people before being put to death by lethal injection. This is 10-Minute Murder.
10-Minute Murder contains depictions of actual crimes. What you are about to hear is real and violent in nature. Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. I'm Joe, the host, and thanks for being here. Now quickly, check where you're listening right now. Be sure you're subscribed. I mean, you probably know without looking if you're subscribed. And I'm not trying to run your life or anything, but I will tell you that when you are a subscriber to 10-Minute Murder, you get a couple of benefits. First of all, you'll make my whole day, so that's cool. Also, you won't miss any of the episodes throughout the week. You open your listening app and boom, there they are. And it's completely free, so there's that. You can also connect with 10-Minute Murder in the comfort of your own Facebook or Instagram account. Just search in the search bar and you'll see it pop up. Or find the show notes of this episode, however you do that, and I'll leave the links to connect on social media. Now, let's talk about Joseph Paul Franklin, the racist killer. Joseph Paul Franklin was born as James Clayton Vaughn Jr. in Mobile, Alabama, April 13, 1950. More in a moment on why he changed his name. Joseph's father, a World War II veteran and a butcher by trade, abandoned the family when Joseph was about 8 years old. However, he did drop by for occasional visits, and those friendly visits would include drunken beatings. His mother, Helen, was a very strict, full-blooded German lady, a perfectionist. Joseph later said about his childhood that he wasn't very well fed. He was hungry most of the time, he was physically abused, his mother didn't care for him or his 3 siblings, and all of that stunted his emotional development. Joseph said he felt like he was always 10 or more years behind other people in maturity. By the time he got to high school, Joseph Franklin became interested in evangelical Christianity. Then he dabbled in Nazism. And by dabble, I mean he was in it up to his eyeballs. He became a member of the National Socialist White People's Party and the Ku Klux Klan. The whole reason he changed his name from his given name, and you'd assume it was because he was a junior and his father beat the heck out of him and ghosted the family, but no. It was in honor of Paul Joseph Goebbels, who is the chief propagandist for the Nazi Party, and Benjamin Franklin. In the 1960s, after reading Hitler's Mein Kampf, Joseph became inspired to start a race war. He said, "I've never felt that way about any other book I've read. It's something weird about that book."
What started the feelings toward the blacks?
Mainly reading a whole lot of newspaper articles about black crime, and they would focus on that in white power newspaper, any black on white crimes. And it just became something I was constantly obsessed with and thinking about.
For much of the 60s and 70s, Joseph Franklin roamed the East Coast, drifting along, looking for any opportunity to, quote, cleanse the world of people he considered beneath him. People like blacks and Jews. What really got him going is when he'd see an interracial couple. It's not cheap being a racist on the go, so Joseph financed his murder sprees by robbing banks. It wasn't always convenient to steal money from a bank, so during those times, he went to a different kind of bank. A blood bank. Thank God it wasn't a sperm bank. He'd find blood banks that would pay him for his blood donation when he was getting low on money. In August of 1977, Joseph murdered the first of the people that we know about. Just the previous month, he firebombed a synagogue in Chattanooga, but luckily no one was killed in that attack. But in August, Joseph saw a couple in a mall parking lot in Madison, Wisconsin. They were an interracial couple. He shot and killed them both. A couple months later, in St. Louis, Missouri, Franklin hid in the bushes outside a synagogue. He fired on attendees leaving the service. He killed one and injured 2 more.
But I was just waiting for people to come out during the services. I just when I did see some people, I began firing on them. But I was really terrified, though. I mean, I was scared while I was sitting there. I'd taken a large nail and drove it into a post, a telephone pole, and then put some socks on it to have something to rest the rifle on, which was kind of crude. You know, I really didn't need anything to rest the rifle on. I was a very inexperienced shooter, too, at that time. I just started my mission. That was in early, 77, so I really didn't know how to shoot that well. I later began practicing a whole lot over the next 3 years and became a much better shot. But at that point in time, I could barely hit the broadside of a barn. I just learned how to shoot well enough to hit somebody.
Did you realize you had hit somebody?
I didn't actually see the guy being hit, but I saw the reaction of somebody else who was standing next to him that appeared to indicate he is looking down at somebody, I didn't even stop long enough to look at him. Instead of actually putting the crosshairs on anybody and firing again like I did with the first guy, I just fired about 4 or 5 bullets. Then I just dropped the gun, jumped on a bicycle that I had planned to use to escape so no one would see what type of car I was driving. Got to the car and just, ditched the bicycle.
Feel any remorse at that point, or what did you feel after?
Well, not at that point in time. I really didn't have any other feelings in my mind other than fear.
March of 1978, Joseph Franklin ambushed the Hustler porn magazine publisher for printing images of interracial sex. He later confessed to be the culprit, but was never charged. Larry Flynt survived the attack, but lived his life in a wheelchair, addicted to painkillers, and speaking with slurred speech after a stroke. He died earlier this year in February 2021. July 29, 1978, Franklin hid near a Chattanooga Pizza Hut, where he shot Bryant Tatum and Nancy Hilton with a 12-gauge shotgun. Hilton, a white woman, survived the shooting. Her boyfriend, Bryant, a black man, died. The following year, a Taco Bell manager, a black man named Harold MacGyver, was shot through the window from 150 yards away. Franklin later said that he killed him for being in close contact with white women. Joseph Franklin went on killing through August of 1980. Fresh off of killing 2 men in Salt Lake City, Utah, he was driving through Kentucky when he was pulled over. They asked about the firearm he had in his car, and then Joseph took off. They didn't catch him then, but they noticed that his car was similar to one that was seen in the area during some of the shootings. He had very obvious racist tattoos, and they found out that he had a habit of visiting blood banks. Investigators issued a nationwide alert to all blood banks to be on the lookout for Franklin. In October of 1980, a Florida blood bank worker recognized the tattoos and contacted the FBI. He was arrested in Lakeland, Florida, a couple of days before Halloween in 1980. During his many criminal trials, a question of his competency came into play. It's believed that Franklin may be a paranoid schizophrenic, and it was argued that he may be unfit to stand trial. They noted his delusional thinking and childhood history of severe abuse. His confession was also played in court. And despite Larry Flynt's appeal to spare the man's life that put him in a wheelchair, saying, "A government that forbids killing among its citizens should not be in the business of killing people itself," James Franklin was sentenced to die by lethal injection. About a week before his execution, Franklin gave an interview, feeling remorse, kind of.
Do you know how many people you murdered?
Yeah, but I'd rather not mention it.
By my count, it's 22 people. Is that the same number that you have?
That's approximately it. I wished I could go back and change things, but there's no way I can do it, so I'll try to do it, make the best of it. If I had some way to make amends to them, I would try to do that. Being locked up in here on death row with an execution date a week away, I can't really do a whole lot for them.
Do you think about those 2 boys in Cincinnati?
No, I don't really think about them. I mean, I can't go back and think about the cases, individually. I have too much other problems, too much other things I have to focus on and worry about,
Those are 2 young boys, just 13 and 14 years old.
Yeah, it was just, I regret the fact that I shot them now.
Why did you shoot them?
Well, I was just waiting. I was sitting on that railroad track waiting for the first either interracial couple or black to walk by.
And what was your mission?
Well, to try to get a race war started, mixed race couples and blacks, I figured if once I started doing it and showed them how, other white supremacists would do the same thing, follow suit. You know,
So you hope people would copy you?
I hope that other white nationalists would do the same thing.
Do you think you're a hero to those hate groups?
Well, that's what they tell me, you know. I just felt like I was at war, you know, and it was the survival of the white race was at stake, stuff like that, you know.
Do you feel that way now?
No, not at all. No, I can see now I was wrong. It's wrong. Violence is wrong at any time, you know.
Do you feel that way because you got caught?
No, not at all, no. As a matter of fact, it took me many, many years to change. I actually thought, as misguided as I was doing the will of God. You know, I thought I was actually doing right. This is what God wanted me to do.
But the police were pursuing you. How could you think that?
Yeah, I know it, but I thought the whole system was all evil, though.
The execution began at 6:07 a.m. in Missouri on November 17th, 2013. He officially renounced his racist views, saying that being in prison, where he interacted with black people closely, quote, "I saw that they were people just like us." Joseph Paul Franklin was pronounced dead 10 minutes after the execution began. That's today's 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Thank you for listening today. In the story you just heard, there's this speculation of whether or not Joseph Franklin was a subject of Project MKUltra. And if you don't know what that is, it's worth a Google search, but the short version is it was a government brainwashing experiment that started in the 50s and they claim ended in the 70s. And if this was a conspiracy theory podcast, I could have gone down a deep rabbit hole talking about that aspect of this guy. But I like to stick to mostly proven facts, so that's why I'm just casually mentioning it here. And by the way, the accepted assassin of Martin Luther King, James Earl Ray, was also thought to be a part of the MKUltra project. Now, MKUltra is/was a real thing that really happened, so that part of it's not a conspiracy, but who was involved is not exactly clear. The Unabomber. Okay, I'm hushing about it. You can Google that if you're interested in knowing more about that. So, if you have a story you'd like for me to cover during this podcast, you can email it to me, 10minutemurder@gmail.com. You can also send it to me on social media just as easily. But we need to be connected first. Just click the link in the show notes of this episode, or even easier, just type 10-Minute Murder into Facebook or Instagram, and it'll pop right up. Before you go, subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening right now, and you'll never miss an episode. And if you have friends that are into brief true crime stories like this, tell them about 10-Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.